There we are. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We're using Teams this time. Normally, we're using another tool, so it's the first one for us, but it's a bit like a normal Teams meeting. Today's topic is really about how to use business processes in ERP implementations. And I'm very happy to have Etienne, our great South African partner, here with us today. And Etienne, I know you'll get some time to introduce yourself shortly. So I just wanted to cover the agenda for what we're doing today first. I'm Søren from Gluu, by the way. What we're going to be talking about is really some misconceptions about ERP implementations in the new world, where you have software that is standard and continuously updated. Then I know Etienne has prepared some insights into a real project that he's running currently, where we will see the specific moving parts of an ERP systems implementation in this process perspective. So it will really be an idea for the ideals project from a process perspective, I would say. But Etienne, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, where to start? My name is Etienne, as you say, and I'm in Cape Town, South Africa. I've been in this business process world for my whole career, and I finished in the corporate world 5 years ago. And the sort of roles that I played was head of enterprise architecture, business architecture, managing teams of business analysts, doing projects, doing these ERP projects and so forth for very many years. Then I decided to start a consulting company called Process to Product. And for that to work, I wanted, because I've been on the other side, I wanted a tool that was powerful, but cost effective, but most of all, something that can actually help to build a process culture in an organization. So with that, I evaluated 7 sort of state-of-the-art process tools. And I had a panel that helped me to evaluate the things. And then finally, yes, it stood out clear that Gluu was the winner. And now I'm a Gluu partner and using Gluu on projects here in South Africa. That's it.
Yeah,
Did I miss something?
Great. We're happy for that. I forgot to mention that the presentation that Etienne will be sharing will also be shared with you afterwards. So there will be a lot of detail here. But before we jump into the misconceptions, let's talk a little bit about what has changed. I remember back in the old days, because as you know, ERP implementations are still failing at the rate of 70%, 70 to 80%. And in the old days, you would make this upgrade every 5 years, and that would be a project. It was a cost, and you're done with it, and then you wait another 3 to 5 years, and you do another upgrade. But now, of course, with tools like Dynamics 365 framework, everything is standardized. So this means the standard will be continuously upgraded. So now suddenly the organization can't customize it that much. The customization is in the processes, and it really changes the picture, right?
Yes.
And what we also see is in the new world of AI, that further changes how you approach this whole thing, where suddenly the flexibility is in all the processes. So you really need to take the process side much more seriously. But that's a little bit how the game has changed, I would say. But Etienne, could you take us through some of the common misconceptions that we both see in this world of ERP and BPM? Because I know everybody would agree on the surface that business processes are important, but in practice, we do see quite a lot of different practice out there, and some of them that are honestly misunderstanding it a little bit.
Yes, I will, but I'm going to share now as well. So just help me here quickly and see if everybody see.
Yes.
You see? Yeah, okay. All right. So what I want to do is this whole misconception topic I think, as we all can see, this picture, we all know, and this is still very true in many environments today. You got a bunch of consultants coming in and they use anything, and they build this drawing, lots of slides, lots of Visio diagrams, lots of Excel spreadsheet stuff, just stuff. And then they try and use that to implement a particular ERP solution. And for that matter, it's just not ERP, it's any application for that matter. But let's talk about ERP. On the other side, you have a more process management approach, which gives you much more value, because the process management approach is not a once-off. It actually connects your people who is responsible for delivering goods and services in the company, to the processes that actually does it, and it's an ongoing thing. So you keep on managing that. So I think one of the misconceptions is that if you think you can come in on the left and be successful with something like that, and I've just experienced that now in a real example, where a very good partner as a stakeholder in this particular program followed that approach, and it just doesn't work, to be honest. So I don't want to say too much about that, but that's that side of things. So before I get into the misconceptions, I also think, if I just want to set the scene for this particular project, this is a subset of a bigger project. But as you can see from this, these are some facts about a typical project. You've got the project. Because you have on the left a process catalog which you manage, which is something you manage continuously. It's not something you create once and now it's done and you put it in SharePoint in an archive and nobody looks at it again. No, this is a living thing. In this particular case, we've got 24 categories, 189 groups, and 912 processes. So from there, this project is now touching 38 of those processes. But
just
each process...
a quick question, Etienne. Those 912 processes, where do they come from? And I know this is a current project you're working on, right? But
yeah.
Where are those from? An outside source? Are they internal to the company?
They were done in collaboration with a big consulting company. So we then created and identified that, and that becomes the master for the business. And within that, obviously, you're not going to do all 912 from day one. Now we're focusing on the ones that are touched by the project. So the one project is touching something like 163 processes. And this project I'm doing now is touching 38 of those processes. So yeah, so it's using the catalog to merge your processes with projects. But I think the other key thing here is that on the left here, if you look at the process owners, now you are connecting and identifying relevant process owners who own those processes end to end. Those process owners, you can see 10 in this case. It could go up, but in this case now it's 10. Then you have, in this particular case, 72 roles. So now you can start seeing how it cascades. Now suddenly you have a lot of people. Those are roles, but behind each role sits individuals. So let's say the worst case scenario, you've got 10 people in, not the worst case, but as an example to make the math easy, but let's say you've got 10 people in each role. So then you've got 720 people impacted. So the exact numbers, I don't know right now, but it's a large number. So you can see from day one, by managing a decent process catalog, kicking off any project, it gives you a lot of information to help you scope and determine the impact on stakeholders very easily. So it's not something you have to go and do. Yes, you still have workshops, of course, but it's not like you have to go and figure out all these things in a very, very tedious manner. It's more interrogating the platform and getting the right answers, and then putting it together and doing the scope. And in this particular case, there's only 11 applications identified so far. And what was interesting here is that, yes, you think ERP is going to solve everything, but only 46% of the activities are actually supported by applications. So the majority are things that is actually being done by humans. And the reality is, yeah, not all those things you would be able to automate anyway. The nature of this particular project, the type of work these people do, it's human activities. So that sets the scene, I think, for your project facts. But now, if you go to your misconceptions, a long way to get here. But I think this picture for me is like $1 million slide. Not everybody has got a clear understanding of what business process management is. It's not so difficult as some vendors would like you to believe. It's actually pretty simple. Each business that you have out there at the top of the business is there to produce some sort of goods or service. And for that, they charge some, they earn revenue with it. And that's how they compete in the market. And in the bottom, you've got the management. So usually what happens is you've got a lot of effort in restructuring. You'll find it in organizations. They go through restructuring. It's like a pet hobby, going through restructuring. But what's actually the problem is they don't have this middle thing. They don't have the processes. And that's why they're trying to figure around the org structure. But if they had a very good process focus, it's much easier to balance your capabilities with your workforce and to get a much more easier fit. So in that sense, just think about it this way. Processes are there to realize your products and services. Whether you're buying a car, whether you're buying insurance, whether you're shopping in a retail store, doesn't matter. Even if you go to your local coffee shop, they might not have a defined process, but that coffee shop, like Starbucks, for instance, has got a pattern that if you order a macchiato or whatever it is, it's the same thing whether in New York or here or anywhere, the way they do it. So misconceptions. I'll start with the one I like the most, and that's the one in orange here, or whatever color that is. I think it's orange. This believing in out-of-the-box functionality. So, as I said earlier, when the consultants walk in the door with their solution, most of them don't know, as I said earlier, that only a certain percentage of activities are actually automated. They don't have the big picture. So the other big thing is, I haven't experienced this in my whole career. It might be unique to South Africa, I don't know, but I've never experienced it. I've worked with Americans, I've worked with German companies, I've worked with local companies all over. I've never, ever seen an ERP vendor coming in and presenting the standard or proposed processes linked to their application. So it's always a lot of screens and a lot of data and a lot of text. Yes, we can do this, we can do that. And so, yeah, that's one area for me which is quite concerning. Then another one on the top, ERP implementation is just an IT project. Well, if you look at the picture, it's all about business at the end of the day. So it is actually about the people and getting the people enabled to work better by giving them proper tooling, in this case, an ERP platform. But there's also things like work instructions, there's training and so forth that needs to be embedded in all of this to make it happen. So it's definitely not just an IT project. In my case now, where I'm busy with, one of the key focuses now is to integrate three things. It's the process view, it's the SOPs or the work instructions, and the training, to get that into one view so that it's a trusted environment. Currently, it's not. So you've got discrepancies between these different areas. The ERP system will fix all our problems. I think it's a bit of a repeat of what I've already said. The ERP solutions are usually very good, but it doesn't have everything in it. So, and to do a fit gap analysis, a proper fit gap analysis is to actually map it to the processes of your company and to understand what the gaps are. Therefore, if a vendor could come in with, let's say, the best claims processing process for insurance company and how their tool supports it, it's much easier to validate that because business people can relate to the process language. Talking about data screens and things like that, not so easy. All right, so that's another misconception. The last one for me, there are many more, of course. ERP implementation, is a one-time project, and this was a very interesting one. I hope this person is not on the call today, but I won't mention his name. But he is actually a friend of mine as well. But he was also the CIO for one of these big retailers. This is a few years ago. It's not the current one. And I could never understand why he wasn't keen on this whole process topic. And then once we were finished with the project, this was implementing Oracle stuff. I met him. He went then to overseas to Singapore. So now maybe he's listening. He knows I'm talking about him, but he went to Singapore. And I met him afterwards by chance. He was in South Africa again. I met him in a local town called Stellenbosch here at a coffee shop. And we started talking, and I wanted to know by him, why didn't he buy this whole process thing? And it was interesting, the answer. His answer was that he was contracted and his KPIs was to get the ERP system in on time and in budget, not sustainability. And he was worried that this whole process thing might actually make it longer. As we all know, it won't, but that was his, blind spot. So yeah, those are a couple of misconceptions that I have.
A little bit to summarize on some of that. It seems to me also what I see in the market is that many of the companies, they don't have any business processes and they have no awareness of it unless it's with a small group of people that have hired some consultants to map them. But they don't, these are the consultants' processes. They are not the business processes.
Yes.
So the business sometimes thinks that they can leapfrog this and go straight to the ERP system, and that will contain the business processes. So often they think they get everything in the ERP system. So I think that's also speaking to what you're talking about, that you don't think you need the business processes because you think they are embedded into the business, into the ERP system, but they fail to realize that it's a tiny, as you were saying initially, it's a tiny part of your end-to-end process that's really supported by the ERP system in the end.
Yeah, I think it's what you say is spot on. But the other key thing is as well, it's very difficult for business people to evaluate these ERP platforms because, like I say, they don't make the processes visible. So it's like a Pandora's box. It's hidden. All the stuff that they can do. They promise you everything. They can do everything, but that's not the reality. But I think if there's any ERP vendor out there listening to me, they can either take a pinch of salt or whatever. But it'll be very good if you come with a process approach linked to your platform and use that to communicate to your business people because they would understand that. And from that point of view, it's not just implementing, it's also the ongoing maintenance. We'll get to that a little bit later. So yeah, that's my take on it.
So to summarize what you're saying, what I hear you say is that there's really a business project before the ERP project. You need to understand how your business operates. You need to understand your processes. And by understanding them, you will understand better what exactly is the scope of your ERP project, like the slide you showed us a few minutes ago.
Okay. If I can go on, then is to say that, but if you got these hiccups or problems, how can you resolve these things in a degree? So this is not the be all and end all. This is a Microsoft framework. You can obviously use your own, you can create or use something else. But on this topic, this first bit, initiate, is so important. And I have done this 3 times in my career where I have been involved in scoping large ERP programs where I don't want to name the consultants now, but the big fives come in with a very, very high number in terms of cost to do this sort of thing. And how this happened is this is actually a bit of too much confidence from myself, I guess, but it paid off. So the one company, this was also where I started, this large retailer implementing this Oracle stuff. Because I was head of the business analysis competency and architecture and that stuff, they got all these consultants in, but then they said, maybe we should ask our local guys in-house how they would do it. And so they asked me as well. So then I came up with a proposal, and my proposal was that I can do this in 1 week, from a Monday to a Friday. We can scope the whole program. And I put up a very clear proposal of how to do this. And then they called me in and said, but this is impossible. So you must remember, these are executives now and the CEO and the big boardroom with all these fancy chairs. They got me in there. How is this possible? Everybody else asks so much money. And how are we going to do this? At that point in time, I already had a very good process catalog of the company in place. And I said to them, it's very simple. I know which executives and their next layer are involved in this program. If we can get them all for 1 week in a room, in the boardroom, we can identify all the key processes that each of them is involved in. We can also identify the key gaps. And in long story short, they bought into my concept and we did it. And it was a massive success. I did that 3 times in my career with various companies, 3 different companies. So it definitely can work. But getting back to this, the moving parts of the ERP implementation, I will get to this in more detail now. I just want to show you to the left. Yes, obviously you can go and design your own particular flavor of doing things. So you don't have to just use what a vendor or Microsoft or Oracle, whoever else out there says. You can use your own, you can create your own. So be creative and get your own flow going in terms of how you deliver solutions. And remember, you also want to design this because you would like to have a standard way of delivering solutions for all projects. So it's
just so I understand, is this your recommended process, project process, so to say?
Yes, okay. It is. But obviously we can tweak it, but that's it, yeah. So that's what I wanted to discuss there. But if I go now to the moving parts of a typical ERP project, if you look at this, we talked about this now quite some time, is the process catalog hugely important. Never underestimate that. That's a huge thing. You need to understand what your business is about, and you need to understand who are the participants in that environment. So it's not the names of the people. Yes, that's also important, but it's the org units, the roles, and that sort of things that you have to have in place.
Let me try to ask a question that you could hear from out there. So why do I need to map the whole business if we're just implementing an ERP system for the finance function?
You don't have to map the whole company. What you can do is, like I said earlier, I got the key stakeholders in place. I got them in a room, and in that room, we then mapped out, because they know their business. They just don't think of it as a process. Then we could break it down into the, let's say, 30, 60, whatever processes it was. But then they had a clear picture. Wow, this is what we involved in, and this is how they link, which is very important. So this is to say, this is where finance plugs into the whole cycle in terms of buying and whatever, the different areas of the business. So you don't have to go and do a massive exercise and create the whole world in day one. No, you don't have to. You can build it up piece by piece. You can build a subset of the catalog and go on and extend it next time around and so forth. Ultimately, you will have a big exercise. The one where I was involved now, we were lucky. The company had a good vision, and they wanted to get a comprehensive catalog of processes as a standard, and they did that, and now it's a once-off exercise, and now we have it. Now it's a question of managing it. So yeah,
If I may add a quick reflection there, because another element of what you're talking about, I think, is that when the external company, the external big five or large consultancy maps all the processes, then often they would be mapping ideal to be processes that may be so far from the reality of the company. And what you're talking about is really mapping as is processes. And that is how the business operates. And that is the context that the ERP system will exist in.
Yeah.
So it's a hugely different perspective and strategy, and no wonder that the other one is failing, because if you're building an ERP system for an ideal future to be process, then it's so detached from the reality of the business that in the end, when you're looking at user adoption of the ERP system, nobody's gonna see how this supports what they're doing.
Yes, I mean, this triggers another thought. In the earlier days, there's a big business here in South Africa. They were the biggest health insurer in the country, but then they had to close their doors because of this. So they went to market to think they can fit an American ERP package to South African problems. It didn't work. So the business closed the doors at the end of the day. So it was a massive, massive failure. Yeah, anyway. So back to the slide here. I'm going to go through this quickly because I want to get to the more colorful things. So the other thing which we're going to get to now as well is now, if you understand this concept of your process catalog, if you now think about it, the company has got multiple projects going on in one time. It's not just one project. But if you now can map your processes to your projects, you can start understanding now which projects are touching the same process, therefore the same process owners, the same roles, the same systems. Therefore, it's a better chance of working in a collective way than in silos. It just makes it easier. And then it touches on that is the process owners and governance, because now your project scope is actually connected to your processes. In the implementation phase, I'm going to jump through this very quickly. What we do and what I believe is good is if you can think of the concept of agile in terms of epic features, user stories, and tasks. We relate processes to epics. So a process is an epic. Each activity is actually a feature, because if you have an activity on the process that says, I don't know, something you have to do, prove account or whatever, or create account or whatever it is, it's a feature. That feature can have multiple stories to it, and each story can have tasks. And those are things that have to be configured, built, and whatever. So if you tie it to your processes, you know exactly which parts of your process is already enabled and which parts are still, not working properly. In the test phase, then because of that, your process becomes the foundation for user acceptance testing, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. In the prepare phase, this is one area that's hugely important, because ultimately to get the people on the floor, wherever they are, to actually use the processes and the system is your work instructions. So the work instructions, your training must be embedded in your processes. The cutover side is how you implement, again, based on your processes. Now you know how they all link together. You know that this process is a dependency on another process, so it makes it easier to plan how you're going to actually roll out things from that point of view. So it might be better to do certain things before you do something else, because they naturally have to go together to implement. During operations, this is also very interesting, because if we haven't done this yet, but we want to do this, is to link the processes with, other words, the work instructions and all the detail and the trainings to the help files of the application. So when you're in a particular area and you need help, you actually get to the underlying processes, and that way you continuously you're getting usage and feedback from what is happening out there in the real world. Because if somebody uses the system and they need help, they can actually get the latest, greatest SOP linked to it in this fashion. So this is what we do. So yeah, I think looking at my watch here, I'm going to jump to the next bit. Is there any questions? Søren, is it fine? Can I go on?
Yeah, I think I haven't mentioned that to the audience yet, but there's a Q&A function, so please feel free to ask any questions as they pop up, and we'll make sure that to answer them. But please, Etienne, go to the more detail of the different moving parts.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, if we look at the areas and it doesn't have to be the same like this for all companies, but the one that's for my mind, which is you have to have, is these two on the top. So you have a process catalog, and the process catalog is connected to your stakeholders. So if you look at this is not the real company, but this is to give you an idea of if you walk into a company from here, if you have this view, these are the people that run the company. And from here, you can now go into each area and look at the detail. So that's the key thing. So your key capabilities is linked to the people at the top level. And this is now just a view of it. Then that links to the process catalog over here. So if you look at the process catalog, and this is a small video of the process catalog, you will see now if I go to a particular area, it opens up and I can see all the processes. I can see there's 112 processes there. I can also show it in a list. I can now get a lot of information over here. I can understand the roles, the owners, and so forth. Remember, this is something you maintain ongoing. So this is not something you're doing just with this ERP implementation. This is something the next project will use, and the next project, and the next project. So it's ongoing. So you have a lot of information to get going very quickly. All right, so that's the catalog area. So now you use the catalog on the scoping side of things. So if you look at the scoping now, so whatever this project is, this is a small example, otherwise the screen becomes too busy. But here you can see you've got the various people from this area involved, marketing. So there's marketing, sales, finance, and so forth. All the people involved in this particular project. Now, the scoping was done based on processes. It was not done on PowerPoint slides and Excel thing and whatever. It was really done against the processes that is owned by different people in the business.
Yeah, so as I understand it, Jen, these are the process owners that you bring in from the start, and you put them in charge of really defining what is the business for you, and then how will the ERP system support your end-to-end processes. Yeah.
Yes, and because of course we use Gluu for this. So in the beginning, those people are onboarded and they know where they're involved in and so forth. So you start building this way to have conversations around processes when you introduce change. So if you look at the scoping example over here now, also a small video here, you can have a look at this. So a lot of things you can now assess early on because you maintain a lot of detail about your processes from day one. So here I can see the various processes, how they connected to this project called project cash flow for this example. I can now also see the process owners of other processes. So now I can see all the people at a high level from a process owner point of view who is involved in this particular project. And I can go deeper and deeper and deeper, and I can get to understand the various applications used. I can look at things like common aspects, roles, and so forth across. So I've got a lot of information right from day one in terms of setting the scope, competencies, and so forth. So remember, yes, your first project that you do, you won't have all this information. But the second project you do, the third project you'll do, you start reusing this. And at the end of the day, this will give you a much better competitive advantage in doing any project in the company because you have a lot of information on hand when you start a new initiative. And that's the key idea over there. All right, then I will do this in the next slide as well. But from here, what I meant here with process design is I'll do this in the next slide under the next phase. So at a high level, you might want to start understanding key gaps. So here, you might not go down to complete process designs. You might actually stay at this level in the project scoping area, and you might start identifying key gaps because you're really only in the initiate phase and you might not go into all that detail. But if you have already existing processes, because remember, this is the idea that I'm trying to preach here, is that once you've done this, there will be new releases coming, there will be new updates and so forth. So you have this complete picture all the time of responsibilities, impact assessments, requirements, and so forth. All right. So, but we will get to that now in this implement phase. So the next phase, implement. So we did scoping. Now I'm going to go into process design. So now I've got to start looking at my processes and doing high level designs or detailed design, sorry, not high level. So yeah, I can go and look at my various roles. It's role descriptions, it's their competencies, it's the actual people involved in those roles. So now you build up this whole view of ultimately, when you want to implement this, who's impacted. So yeah, you've got your complete RACI for that particular process. And these are the people that's actually going to start using this process. So from there, you've got different views. You can get a complete manual, which is gives you all the information related to that process. And from day one, you might not have all the work instructions, but that comes later. So yeah.
So what I understand, you are sort of embedding the ERP system screens and how to use it inside the playbook of the work, the process itself, so that it becomes a part of it, a supporting tool in the process, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So think about it of when you actually drive each of these processes in the scoping, each of them you go into a level deeper. Each of the blue blocks here is now, as I said earlier, a feature. That was the epic, and now you get your features. Now you start getting to the detailed requirements. So if I go to requirements here, I'll get to that now. So if you go to requirements, because you need requirements, just open up that. You need requirements to understand where the gaps are on this particular process and what you want to close. So it might be that you have to configure certain things in the ERP solution. It might actually be that you have to build something or code something. But now you can see for each of these areas, the requirements you can still word as user stories, but they're related to the particular process and on a certain activity of that process.
So this might be the comments of the impacted user group, for instance.
Yeah.
So it's like you're almost like maybe crowdsourcing or getting input from a broader group of people that you would otherwise be able to reach. Is that how you do it?
Yes, you will do workshops, and in the workshops you will identify gaps. And the way to close the gaps is to log a requirement against it. In Gluu, they call about suggestions, but that's the same sort of thing. So you're suggesting to do this, to make this a better feature, and then you identify the requirement. In our case, we use user story format, and you have a user story. So you define the user stories. But remember now, those user stories is now linked to an activity, to a process owner, to the role on that activity, to the application that's associated with that activity. You've got the full picture of where that requirement sits in. All right, so if you can look at it here now, because you use this now in user acceptance testing as well. So this is now a typical process, and this one, if I go into it now, you will see that I've got some requirements here now associated to this particular process. I can look at the ones that are approved, and then I get in this case, there's 6 items. I can go to the process where they occur. And there I can see 2 have been approved already or been implemented, 4 are still missing. So they're not missing, they haven't been implemented yet. So now, if I now want to release them as part of my user acceptance testing, I will have to go and check whether the features that was built in the new ERP system is actually doing what the user story said. And if it does do it, that point in time, you can now go to Gluu in this case, and you can now see, okay, so those things have actually been implemented, and now you start managing your product backlog. So let's say you had 50 items in the product backlog, and now you've done 10 of them, you've still got 40 left over to do, and so forth. But it's all neatly integrated again to the processes.
Yeah, but your process is the framework for the whole thing. So your process owner is always the one at the top, and that, I guess that really makes it a business project and not an IT project, right?
Yeah, as I said in one of my opening slides, if you understand that it's processes that realize products and services, then you've got it. Then you understand the whole environment. There's nothing else that actually does it. It's the processes. Some processes are automated. Yes.
No, I think that's a very good point. I think the difference from what I see in a lot of projects out there is that the process map is just another small thing in the bigger picture. It's primarily an IT project, and it's just a little static input that was done initially. It's not really used. But what you're doing here is you're putting the business process at the center of everything, and you're keeping it alive, and you keep looking at whether we're doing things the right way on the basis of whether it's supporting the business process, with the business process sort of the framework. And I think that's a very different mindset, right? So you're also continuously changing the business process, because not only the system will be, well, ideally, you're probably more likely to change the process than the system, right? If you want to stick with standards.
Yes. I mean, again, as we said earlier, one of the misconceptions is that any system implementation is a once-off. It's not. The business changes, the software changes, so both of them change. So you need to understand where the changes are happening. I've built 6 houses in my life before, so I designed them all by myself, and I built them. And I know the value of having a plan of a house in CAD, computer-aided design. So if you don't have a plan, and then 5 years later you want to make a change to the house, and if you don't have a plan, because that happened to me once, I've deleted all my stuff. I had to get somebody to redraw my current plan of the house, so the as is. So that's stupid. So if I maintain it, it was so easy to understand I've got a very good baseline to go on. The same with the business. If you have a baseline process, manage it continuously, and you go on. So yes, running out. So last phase, operate phase. It's massively important is the fact that you need very good work instructions. We did talk about this a little bit earlier, but if you look at this particular process as well, this is a IT process, configuring a merchandise management system. So you've got all the sort of things that IT guys have to do. In this particular case, Microsoft Dynamics example, things that they have to configure and so forth to make sure the system is up and running and so forth. But all of this is now connected to the process. The guys have got the process to actually do this, but it's got the work instructions as well. And that's when this is finished. I will show you the next bit now. Once you've got the work instructions, how do you actually get that in a world where you run into execution? So now this is a difficult one to show, but if you understand the concept that, as I said earlier, a certain percentage of the activities will be able to be done in the ERP application. The majority is not done by the ERP application, but the work still needs to happen. So in this particular case, if you think about this exact process, opening up a new store, and you have to get IT guys to configure the back-end systems for that store to be opened successfully. That's not going to be catered for by the ERP system. So what we've done is we've used as an example, use the Gluu functionality to run the execute side, where you can actually drive people through the case management capability that Gluu has to actually do this part as well. So I'll show you quickly in the video. And then, as I said earlier, one was the work instructions, but now I'm going to actually get to the cases. So yeah, I'm saying I have to open up new stores in different towns. These are just examples. And for instance, now I have to do this first one, opening up a store in Caledon, for instance. Those are the things I have to do based on the process. So I have to configure, first of all, I have to configure my merchandise management system. There's my work instructions. I can see how I'm supposed to be doing it if I'm a new person or something has changed, but you've got one place to go to, still a process. I can now go and say, okay, in this case, there's some check boxes that have to be done. It could be forms and so forth, but now you're actually getting the real process being used in a operational environment. So
I guess to summarize, you're sort of orchestrating the end-to-end process execution beyond what the ERP system supports, but to ensure that the users really know when they're going into the ERP system doing certain things at the right places. Is that?
Yeah, exactly. And so this is like a layer across all the applications. One of them is the ERP. Another area which we did do a high-level analysis now is we now know exactly how many activities are currently being performed by using normal email. So now the question is, why don't you replace that with task management? It's much better. So then, things like that. So, but yeah, that's the whole idea. So the last area is this whole thing of improvement suggestions, evaluating new ERP features and so forth. If we go through that, here you will see this example. This is the merchandise management administrator guy. He's got some ideas now. He's been using this, and he's got some improvements that he would like to make. And he doesn't like it so much the way it is right now. He says it's okay, but at a point in time, he would make a suggestion. So this is the same manual in a sense. So this is not to replace this, right?
This is also your documentation, your training material.
Yeah. But
everything
now
there is in terms of how to do this.
Now he says, can't we have a video of this? Now I'm the process owner in this case. I will see this now. And when I log on now as a process owner, I can see, okay, this guy has given me some feedback and he would like this to be a video. We can now review it and I can say, yeah, let's do it. Let's make it a formal suggestion, and now we can implement this change and we can actually assign it to somebody and we can bring that change in. So that's a simple example of just a suggestion from somebody using the process in the business. But the same can apply now when you look at new features. So you now can log requirements for this new feature exactly at the right point where it potentially could be helpful for the business, because you have a big picture view of all the processes and where they are connected and fit in.
I guess what you're also achieving for the IT guys is that you're putting a layer on top of the IT support desk, which is the process owner, because first you have to filter it through the process. Is it really a process problem or is it a systems problem?
Yes,
and then
exactly.
I could imagine a lot of things, if you design your process the right way, most problems are going to be process problems, which are easy to change the way you presented it.
Yes.
And this will mean much fewer change requests and much less frustration with the underlying ERP system.
Yes, exactly.
Because people don't expect it to be a flexible process.
No. But what I didn't show now is, because of time and whatever, but all of this is collecting data as you actually run through all of these things, and all of that data, you can do so many clever things with the data, in terms of, is your process now performing the way you're thinking it's supposed to do? You said you would be able to do this thing in 6 days. Now, why is it taking 13 days and whatever, and things like that? So you've got the data to actually make proper influence, because in Gluu you collect the data when you start running these things. as tasks on top of it. So yeah, I don't know. I don't see any questions, and I've run out of steam now. And so this is the story that I wanted to tell. So to summarize, I think it's think about the whole ERP, any application or system endeavor or project, or any project for that matter in your business. Think about it of connecting the project with processes. Because
Could you go
processes,
back to the misconceptions, Etienne? Then
yeah, I
just
can.
wanted to do a very quick reflection on that, because just to summarize what I've learned and what I've seen from this, the first one, ERP implementation, is just an IT project. Well, that's clearly you've shown that it all starts with how the business operates. It starts by involving the process owners, putting them in charge, giving them the tools to really do their job, and then keeping it that way, that they keep being the ones to say whether or not this works or not by assessing how it supports the end-to-end process. So I see how that really becomes a business project.
Yes.
I think the second one is also well answered by this, because clearly they understand that if I have an end-to-end process of, let's say, 20 activities, maybe only 5 of them are even interfacing with the ERP system. Well, then we know that the ERP system is not the root cause of all our problems. We just need to fix the process. We just need to make changes in a flexible layer that we can change day to day.
Yes.
And I guess the third one you have is this belief in the out-of-box functionality. I do see that a lot, where people think that it's all embedded into the system, and the system contains a best practice that you will just adopt. And even if there's a little bit of that in terms of how you send out an invoice or something, then the real process is typically much broader than this. So you will still need to in order to use this out-of-the-box functionality, you need the flexibility in the process. And I guess finally you made a good point about this is not a one-off, because as I understand how this company that you're working with now are going to do it, is that they have laid a foundation that will live as long as the ERP system lives, or longer. And it will also be the foundation for other projects they're doing, but they will have clear separation of their processes, all the artifacts, all the assets linked to that, the capabilities, and the underlying systems. So they know that we don't need to replace systems as often as we think. Maybe we don't need to upgrade them as often as we think, because that's not where the answer lies. Maybe the answer lies in the process, and that is easy to change as long as we have the governance around it. And
yeah,
is that
that's
a
true.
fair summary?
Yes, it is. And in this particular environment, the IT side of the business is actually a complete business on its own. And I can tell you now, for many companies out there, there are very few of them, if there are probably some, but there are very few of them that will be able to tell you, if you go and walk into the CIO's office or whoever else at a senior level, and ask them, okay, but from an operational point of view, which of our activities, for instance, are not system enabled? They won't be able to tell you. They won't know where the inefficiencies are. And the way you do it or identify this is countless meetings. And so this is not a silver bullet at all. This is very good discipline. But this actually gives a very good language to understand how the business functions. So it's so much easier for somebody who comes in. It's so much easier when you make changes to involve everybody. It's, for me, such a natural way of making a business tick over seamlessly. So, yeah.
Well, it's been great to have you share those moving parts and really get into a little bit of the nitty-gritty details of how you're running this project and your projects in general. So thank you so much for that. I can say to the audience that this recording will be available on YouTube and we will also be sharing the presentation in this meeting on Teams. So if you want to share it with any colleagues, there will be a link available. So hope everyone has enjoyed it. I certainly have. And
Thank you.
Thank you, Etienne, for a very inspiring
Right.
presentation.
Nice. Thank you. Bye.
See ya.